A 60-year-old woman becomes pregnant by a priest, and in order to have the baby, she had to make the worst decision of her life. Bylan, a 60-year-old woman, was leading a tranquil life in a small coastal town where everyone knew each other and the sea waves broke the monotony of the days. A widow for 10 years, her life revolved around tending her garden and having tea in the afternoons with her friend Lucia. That morning, an unusually cold air entered through the open kitchen window, bringing with it a change that not even Bylan could have imagined. While cutting roses for the vase that adorned her table, Bylan paused for a moment, leaning on the countertop. Fatigue had hit her harder that day, and an inexplicable premonition enveloped her. "Are you okay, Bylan?" Lucia asked, noticing her friend's unusual pause. Yes, just a bit tired today. Nothing that a good tea can't fix," Bylan replied, forcing a smile while avoiding Lucia's inquisitive gaze. Later, in the privacy of her home, Bylan checked the pregnancy test she had secretly purchased. The bright positive left her paralyzed. At 60, the idea of a pregnancy seemed impossible, a cruel mistake of fate. When Lucia found out, her surprise could not be disguised. Both women sat on the sofa, the tea forgotten on the table, as silence stretched between them. "Bylan, it's extraordinary," Lucia finally said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Extraordinary or not, what am I going to do? This shouldn't be happening, not at my age." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Esteban, Bylan's son, had arrived for his weekly visit. With his usual smile and a warm hug, he immediately noticed the tension in the air. "Is something wrong, Mother?" he asked, his lawyer's instinct alerting him that something was not right. In front of her son's expectant gaze and Lucia's comforting presence, Bylan shared the news. Esteban's reaction was of shock, his words stumbling as he tried to process the information. "Pregnant? But, Mother, how is that possible? This complicates everything." "I know, son, I know. But it's the reality, and somehow I'll have to face it." The conversation that followed was difficult. Esteban, although always the pillar of support for his mother, could not hide his concern about the social and personal implications of this pregnancy. The town, small and often close-minded, would soon be filled with rumors and judgments. "Mother, this won't be easy. The gossip. You can't ignore what this will do to your life here." "Esteban, I know better than anyone, but this is my challenge to face, no matter how hard it is." As the sun began to set, emotions overwhelmed Bylan. The night brought with it a mantle of worry and fear for the future. How would she handle the pressure from the community? How would this affect her relationship with her son? The mystery of the paternity also weighed on her, a secret she guarded with zeal and fear. The first chapter closes with Bylan looking through the window of her bedroom, the moon lighting up her thoughtful profile. Despite the fear, a determination was born in her heart. She would face what was coming with all the strength she had gathered throughout her life. Unbeknownst to her, Bylan was about to embark on a journey that would not only define her, but also change the very fabric of her community. The silence of the night had been broken by Bylan's tormented thoughts. The impact of her pregnancy still reverberated within her, but what troubled her more was the growing fear that what was to come would not only put her life in the public eye, but would also unearth secrets she had been hiding for decades. At dawn, as the sun barely lit the cobblestone streets of the village, Bylan decided to go for a walk. She needed air, space to think, away from the walls of her home that seemed to narrow with each new thought. As she walked toward the church, she felt a stab of uncertainty. Faith had been her refuge, but now it filled her with doubts. The small village church, led by the new priest, Father Miguel, had been the epicenter of her spiritual life in recent months. Upon arriving, she found herself alone in the chapel. The silence, which had always brought her peace, now seemed unsettling. As she lit a candle, she heard footsteps behind her. Father Miguel was watching her with a deep look, a mix of compassion and a curiosity that made her uncomfortable. "Bullen, is everything all right?" asked Miguel, his voice calm. "It is, as much as it can be," she replied, avoiding his gaze. Miguel approached and sat next to her on the church pew. His presence, although comforting, unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. She had confided in no one but Lucia, but something in the priest's gaze pushed her to open up. "I'm expecting a child," Bullen blurted out, her voice breaking with emotion. Miguel looked at her silently, his dark eyes briefly narrowing. His expression, though serene, hid something more. "It's a miracle, don't you think?" he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know if it's a miracle or a test," Bullen replied, unable to hold back tears. Father Miguel remained silent, and though he tried to hide it, something in his rigid posture revealed an underlying discomfort. Before he could say anything more, a sound interrupted their conversation. The echo of a door slamming forcefully outside the church resonated in the air. Bullen felt a shiver run through her. As she rose to leave, a familiar figure appeared at the chapel door. It was Esteban, with an expression of contained fury. "What are you doing here, mother?" her son asked, his voice trembling with anger. Bullen, surprised by his tone, tried to calm him, but Esteban didn't give her time. "What kind of scandal is this? People are talking, mother. They say you've been too close to Father Miguel lately. What will people say when they connect him with your pregnancy?" The tension in the room was palpable. Bullen's face paled at her son's implied accusation. Father Miguel remained silent, but a shadow crossed his face, as if he knew this wouldn't end well. "Esteban, please, don't say things you might regret," Bullen tried, her voice broken. "Regret? I'm the one who has to deal with all this. How do you think it feels to have half the town asking me if the new priest is the father of my future brother?" Esteban said, his face twisted with rage. His son's words echoed in Bullen's mind like a distant but devastating echo. Where had these rumors come from? How had they started? Panic seized her, not just for what was being insinuated, but because, deep down, she knew it wasn't just slander. Father Miguel slowly rose, and his soft tone tried to soothe the situation. "Esteban, please, don't jump to conclusions. Your mother and I have only shared spiritual conversations." "Spiritual?" Esteban responded sarcastically. "This is a disaster. I can't believe everything is falling apart like this." Bullen tried to approach her son, but he stepped back. The pain on his face was evident, but so was the growing mistrust in him. Esteban left the church, leaving Bullen and Father Miguel engulfed in a dense silence. Later that night, Bullen was alone at home, facing the reality of what her son had insinuated. The relationship she had formed with Father Miguel over the past few months had been more intense than anyone could understand. He had been an emotional support during times when loneliness became unbearable. But now, in the quiet of her home, doubts began to gnaw at her. Had she allowed that relationship to cross an invisible line that even she hadn't noticed? An unexpected letter was slid under her door. As she picked it up, fear paralyzed her. Opening it, a brief and sinister note stared back at her from the paper. "I know the truth about the father of your child." The chapter ends with Bullen dropping the letter to the floor, her mind swirling in a whirlwind of panic. The town's gossip mingled with the tangible threat that now hung over her head. Secrets, both present and past, were about to be revealed in a way that even she could not have anticipated. And the fear that someone else, someone in the shadows, knew more than she was willing to admit, filled her with a deep and suffocating anguish. Dawn arrived with a strange feeling of unease that hovered over Bullen. The letter she had received the night before was still etched in her mind as a grim warning. Who could know the truth? That phrase echoed over and over. She felt the walls of her home were confining her to a place where she could not escape the ghosts of her decisions. Balin knew she could no longer ignore the gravity of what was happening. Esteban's words in the church, the judgmental glances in the village, and now this mysterious note, all pointed to an approaching storm. She sought out Lucia, her closest friend, for comfort and clarity. When she arrived at Lucia's house, her friend greeted her with a worried look. Lucia had always been her confidant, her rock in difficult times. But this time, even she seemed at a loss for words. "Lucia, I can't take it anymore. Someone knows the truth. I don't know who, but this is about to blow up." "What makes you think that, Balin?" asked Lucia in a gentle tone, as if fearing the answer. Balin showed her the letter, her hands trembling. Lucia took it and read it silently. After a long moment, she looked up, her eyes full of concern. "Have you spoken to Miguel? He could be in danger too. If someone is looking to harm, I can't involve him more, Lucia. This has already gotten out of control. I don't know who sent this or what they intend, but what terrifies me the most is what might happen when Esteban finds out." Lucia's face tensed at the mention of Esteban. She knew how protective he was of his mother, but also how relentless he could become when he felt something threatened his family's stability. Hours later, Balin decided to face what she feared the most. She headed to the parish, knowing that Father Miguel was alone at that time. The streets of the village were empty, but in every closed window, Balin felt the invisible stares of those who already knew, of those who murmured in whispers that became screams in her mind. When she arrived, Miguel welcomed her with his usual warmth, but there was a palpable tension between them. They sat on the old church benches, the echo of their breaths resonating in the sacred space. "Miguel, I received a letter. Someone knows about us," said Balin, her voice broken. Miguel looked at her intently. The compassion in his eyes was briefly replaced by a shadow of worry. He stood up and began pacing the altar, rubbing his hands in a nervous gesture. "This can't go on. We're in danger, Balin," he said finally, his voice lower than usual. "What do you suggest we do?" asked Balin, feeling the world closing in around her. "We should confess, come forward before they do it for us. Maybe people will forgive us if we're honest," said Miguel, but there was doubt in his voice. Before they could continue, the church door burst open. Esteban stood there, his face hardened, and his expression held nothing good. "So it's true," Esteban said, walking in slowly. "All this time, I knew something was off." Balin tried to stand to calm her son, but he raised a hand, stopping her. "How long has this been going on, Mother? Months? Years?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom. "Esteban, please, let me explain," began Balin, but the words didn't come with the force she needed. "Explain what, Mother? That you've been involved with a priest and now you're pregnant with his child? Is that what you're going to explain?" His voice echoed with fury in the empty church walls. Miguel tried to intervene. "Esteban, this isn't what you think. There's more to the story, but we need to stay calm." "Stay calm? My mother is at the center of a scandal that's going to destroy our lives," shouted Esteban, pointing at Miguel. "And you, priest? Is this what you do? Betray your faith for this?" The tension was unbearable. Balin collapsed onto the bench, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son, consumed by anger and betrayal. "You don't understand, Esteban," she finally said, her voice broken. "This baby, it's what has given me a reason to go on. You've distanced yourself so much from me, always busy, always judging me. And Miguel, he was there when I needed someone the most." In a desperate rage, Esteban grabbed the letter Bullen had brought with her. He read it quickly, and his expression shifted from fury to a mixture of horror and confusion. "Who sent this?" he asked, more to himself than to them. The mystery deepened. Someone was pulling the strings from the shadows, someone who knew more than any of them could have imagined. Esteban, now faced not only with the truth about his mother and Miguel, but with the presence of an unknown threat, dropped the letter to the floor. His gaze shifted from that of an enraged man to someone who had just realized how fragile the situation really was. "This isn't over," murmured Esteban. "Someone is playing with us, and I won't let them destroy what's left of our family." The echo of Esteban's final shouts still resonated in Balin's mind. The letter, with its dark threat, had been the catalyst that pushed her son into fury and confusion. But what tormented her the most was the feeling that someone, from the shadows, was pulling the strings of her life, manipulating her family in an attempt to destroy the little she had left. Miguel had suggested running away, starting fresh far from the town, but Balin knew that wasn't a solution. Running would only mean surrendering, and although she felt more fragile than ever, something inside her refused to let this unknown dark force win. Besides, fleeing would mean losing Esteban forever. The following days were a nightmare. Rumors in the town multiplied, and Balin couldn't leave her house without feeling the weight of judgmental glances. Every conversation at the neighborhood store, every whisper in the streets, seemed to center around her. The scandal had become the only source of entertainment for the curious. But amid all this, something far more serious than gossip emerged: blackmail. One night, as Balin tried to rest, her phone rang. The number was unknown, and when she answered, a harsh, distorted voice spoke on the other end. "We know everything. If you don't want the town to find out the rest, you'd better do as we say." Terror paralyzed her. That voice knew something more, something she had buried for decades. That same night, she went to Lucia for advice, desperate to find a solution. Lucia, with her experience as a retired lawyer, suggested hiring someone to investigate the source of the threats. But Balin wasn't sure she wanted to uncover everything that was hidden. Meanwhile, Esteban had begun his own investigation, driven by anger and a desire to protect his mother. In the weeks that followed, he uncovered something shocking. The blackmailer wasn't a stranger. The clues led him to someone who had been close to them all along. A forgotten figure, a man who had left their lives long ago. Andres, Balin's younger brother, who had been presumed dead when they were young. The news hit like a bomb. Andres had faked his death, fleeing the town after a series of debts and petty crimes. Years later, he had returned in secret, consumed by envy toward Balin, whom he had always seen as the family favorite. He had watched from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to take revenge for everything he believed had been taken from him. And now, with Balin's pregnancy and the scandal surrounding it, he had found his perfect opportunity. The confrontation with Andres was inevitable. Balin, Esteban, and Miguel gathered in the old family home, a place filled with painful memories. When Andres appeared, the man who had once been a mischievous and lively boy was unrecognizable. The harsh lines on his face, the eyes filled with resentment, showed the years of hatred he had accumulated. "You always had everything, Balin," Andres said, his voice full of bitterness. "The family, the respect of the town, and now even a miracle of nature. While I was forgotten as if I never existed." Balin, heartbroken by the pain of seeing her brother like this, tried to approach him. "Andres, I never wanted things to be this way. I thought you were dead. I mourned for you. If I had known you were alive. Don't you dare say you ever cared about me," Andres shouted. "I watched you build your life while mine crumbled, and now I've come to take what's mine." Esteban, unable to contain himself any longer, stepped forward. "What is it you really want, Andres? If it's money, we can resolve that. but I won't allow you to keep manipulating our family." Andres laughed, a bitter, deranged laugh. "Money? This isn't about money, Esteban. I want her to feel what I felt all these years. The rejection, the humiliation. I want to see her fall." At that moment, Miguel intervened. His voice, calm but firm, resonated in the room. "This won't lead you anywhere, Andres. Hatred won't give you back what you think you've lost. All you'll achieve is destroying what's left of your life." Miguel's words seemed to penetrate Andres' armor. For the first time, his eyes showed doubt, a flicker of humanity that had been buried under years of resentment. There was a long silence, and then Andres, defeated, collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to get out of this hole," he said, his voice broken. The air in the room shifted. The tension, which had been on the verge of breaking everyone, began to dissipate. Balin approached her brother, placed a hand on his shoulder, and with a voice full of compassion, said, "It's not too late to change, Andres. We can heal together." Andres, overwhelmed, began to cry. The tears he had held back for years finally flowed, marking the beginning of a possible path to redemption. That night, after Andres left, Balin, Esteban, and Miguel sat in silence, emotionally exhausted. The danger had passed, but the scars ran deep. They knew the town would keep talking, that the scandal would take time to die down. But something had changed. Bullen no longer felt the same despair. She had faced the ghosts of her past and, somehow, had emerged stronger. At the end of the night, Bullen took her son's hand. "Esteban, I know this was more than you could bear, but I'm here, and I'll always be here for us." Esteban, with tears in his eyes, nodded. "Mother, I didn't know how much I needed you until now. All of this made me see how blind I've been." Miguel, from the other side of the table, watched the scene with a mixture of relief and sadness. He knew that his relationship with Balin couldn't continue in the same way, but he also understood that both of them needed to find their own path to peace. Months passed in a tense silence throughout the village. The scandal surrounding Balin had begun to calm down, but the scars of what had happened were still visible. The town, though small, did not forget easily. The furtive glances and whispers still followed Balin at every corner, but she, strengthened by her confrontation with her brother Andres, had learned to walk with her head held high. She knew that the judgment of others was not the end of her story. There was something much greater at stake. The life of her unborn child. Her relationship with Esteban had improved. The experience of uncovering the truth about Andres and confronting the past had brought them closer in a way Bullen never thought possible. Esteban had set aside his initial fury and was now her main source of support. However, there was a shadow that lingered over them both. Father Miguel. Their emotional bond, which had been so strong, had weakened after the scandal, and although they tried to maintain a professional relationship in secret, the tension between them was palpable. They knew they could not continue as they had before. After the confrontation with Andres, Miguel had distanced himself. The guilt and duty to his faith forced him to reflect on his place in Bullen's life and what he needed to do regarding his spiritual commitment. When Bullen's pregnancy reached full term, the village silently prepared for what would be an unprecedented event. Many still wondered how it was possible for a 60-year-old woman to give birth, while others, more superstitious, saw it as divine punishment for her supposed relationship with Miguel. The rumor had settled as an indisputable truth for some, and there was nothing Balin or Esteban could do to stop it. The night of the birth was stormy. The wind battered the hospital windows with fury, and inside, the atmosphere was charged with contained emotions. Bullen had gone into labor, surrounded by Esteban and Lucia, who never left her side. But there was one absence that weighed heavily on everyone. Miguel was not there. For weeks, he had distanced himself more and more. And though he wouldn't admit it, Balin missed him deeply. She knew her love for him had been real, but also that the price they would both pay for that love would be too high. The birth was complicated. Balin's age and the accumulated stress had put both her life and the baby's at risk. As the nurses rushed back and forth, Esteban stood at the door of the delivery room, his face pale with worry. He couldn't lose his mother now, not after all they had been through together. Hours later, after a long process, the cries of a newborn broke the anguished silence. Esteban felt the knot in his chest loosen. The baby, his brother, had come into the world, but the joy was overshadowed by fear. Balin was weak, very weak. Her body, exhausted from the labor, was not responding as expected. The doctors were trying to stabilize her while Esteban watched from a distance, his heart in his throat. Just at that moment, when it seemed like everything might fall apart, the hospital doors flew open and Miguel appeared. He had returned, unable to keep denying what he felt for Balin. The guilt for his absence had consumed him, and in that instant, all that mattered was being by her side. "How is she?" Miguel asked, his voice breaking as he looked at Esteban. "The doctors are doing everything they can," Esteban replied, his own fear reflected in Miguel's eyes. Miguel didn't wait any longer. He made his way to the delivery room, where Balin, weak but conscious, saw him enter. Her eyes, though tired, lit up at the sight of him. In that moment, they both understood what they had been unable to say before. The love they shared, though real, could never survive under the circumstances surrounding them. "You came," Balin whispered, her voice barely audible. "I should never have left," Miguel replied, his eyes full of tears. "We can't go on like this, Miguel. This baby, our lives can't be marked by secrets and shadows." Miguel nodded, knowing her words were true. Though his heart longed to stay by her side, his faith and duty to his community called him in another direction. The silence between them said everything. There was no need for further explanations. They had reached the end of their journey together, but not with resentment, only with a deep understanding that they had been necessary in each other's lives, if only for a time. As the doctors stabilized Balin, and the baby's life was confirmed with the energetic cries filling the room, Miguel did what he had to do. With a kiss on Balin's forehead and one last look, he left. It was the end of their story together, but not of the love that had left a deep mark on them both. Days later, recovered, Balin returned home with her child in her arms and Esteban by her side. The town, still divided, continued to whisper about what had happened, but Balin no longer paid attention. She had won a far more important battle. She had brought life into the world when all seemed lost, had faced her past and her brother, and had accepted that not all love stories are meant to last forever. Esteban, for his part, had learned a lesson about forgiveness and the value of family. His relationship with his mother had changed forever. The baby, his brother, had become a symbol of a new opportunity, a second dawn for a family that had been on the brink of collapse. The story ends with Balin sitting in her garden, holding her baby as the sun sets on the horizon. Life, with all its unexpected turns, had shown her that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for hope and redemption. What did you think of this story? Leave us a comment letting us know what you would do in a similar situation. We invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends or family as a show of support. This motivates us to keep uploading exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We truly value having you here with us, and you can click on the links that are now appearing on your screen. We have an exclusive selection of captivating stories and guaranteed entertainment just for you. See you in the next video. Best wishes.